Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Committee on Budget and Fiscal Review. We have some significant work to do today. We're going to begin as a subcommittee. As a majority of members not yet here, we will do a brief overview of the compromise budget, otherwise known as our Budget Bill Junior. Along with that, which we passed on Monday, will be the Budget Act of 2015. And then we have 13 trailer bills that we'll go through one by one today. And the intention is to have public comment on each of these trailer bills before we cast our vote. I'm going to put a little reminder in eyesight. But if by chance you see me moving too quickly, red flags are appreciated to remind me that I've skipped over something in my attempt to keep this train moving so that we're out of here at a reasonable hour today. But we will have public comment on each trailer bill as we move forward. So with that, I want to welcome back Ms. Bosler. And we will begin. Again, if you could give us an overview, some of the highlights of changes made to the budget bill that we did pass on Monday. Senator Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could make a few introductory comments.
Go right ahead.
Appreciate it. I want to say that up to this point that we've had a very cordial and respectful process, but today that changed, and I know that you do not personally control when bills get introduced or when they get voted on. However, we had a commitment to have all budget and trailer bills in print for at least 48 hours and a goal of 72 hours at a minimum. Yet we just had a bill presented to us not 72 hours before this hearing, but 72 minutes before this hearing. This is not just so that members know what they are going to be voting on, but also so that the people of California can see what their elected officials are doing, and so the press can report on what we are doing. If the bills are so bad that they cannot withstand 2 or 3 days of scrutiny, we shouldn't be voting on them or enacting them. And yet here we are today taking up 14 bills that just went into print yesterday, some less than 24 hours ago, some less than 72 minutes ago, and that is not reasonably adequate time for the public to review them and to provide their input. But I suppose that is the goal, to stifle their opportunity to stop bad bills. This is not how a transparent and open government that respects the people operates. In local government, we have the Brown Act. Things need to be in print. We need to have public noticing of meetings and what we're going to be discussing. And again, Mr. Chair, I do not hold you responsible for this. Others are making decisions to jam this final budget package through with as little scrutiny as possible. I believe you would have kept your commitment if it was up to you. Despite the hours of hearings and meetings that you will try to, no doubt, use to defend this process, there are decisions in these bills that have never been heard, and many that were publicly rejected, only to be put back in when nobody was looking. So I thank you for the time. I'm disappointed, and I hope that we can do better in the future, but I'm not holding my breath.
Thank you, Senator Stone. I'm going to just briefly respond. With regard to one trailer bill of the 13, that would be the drought trailer bill. I cannot disagree with you. That has come to my attention and to everybody else's much later than I would prefer. And I'm not here to defend it. But I also want to underscore your points that I'm not the omnipotent decision maker here.
Understandable.
We strive for better. It doesn't always happen. So that's a purpose of this hearing. So we can dig as deep as you like. We can take it line by line if you like. There is no time limit here today. Every question, every nuance, every uncertainty, any ambiguity or question you may have, that's what this hearing is for.
And Mr. Chairman, I want to applaud you because you've given me that courtesy and others that courtesy throughout every budget hearing that we've sat through, and I appreciate that you give us that opportunity.
Thank you. That's the most and the least that I can do in this process. With regard to the other 12 trailer bills, they have been publicly available since Tuesday night, online, in print, Wednesday morning. So we're at about 36 hours now. We'll be well beyond 48 hours by the time we get to the floor tomorrow. So again, never perfect, but I think short of that drought trailer bill, we're pretty much true to the word that I had expressed earlier in the year. So I accept your comments, and I want to encourage the administration to please, I know that negotiations are multi-sided and decisions don't always get made as quickly as we might like, but we know what our goal is, where our bar is set, and what we'd like to attain. Mr. Vice Chair, want to make any comments before we get?
Just briefly, Mr. Chairman, I do want to thank you as well. You and I were communicating well into the night on many occasions, including last night about it, and I know that some of the delay with the water bill particularly was well beyond your control. And I would have no complaints that we've had some opportunity here to review a lot of these trailer bills. That's good. I will say that in the overall context of the budget that we still yet see unwinding, some of which will come forth in later trailer bills. The prudent approach still has got to be watch what we're doing in spending that are part of building the base and future obligations. And I will state that one of my considerations is to make sure that we do not put pressure on to have to renew the $30 billion tax increase, that it appears the governor doesn't support that either. And they would not build budgets based on that assumption that, oh, well, we'll pick up that $30 billion and just keep rolling it with our spending. So we do have to be careful and prudent, and as we deal with these trailer bills, that will be one thing I will have in mind. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Nielsen. Ms. Bosler, so again, just recognizing that through the negotiated compromise, we did land on the Department of Finance's revenue projections. So with slightly less revenue, slightly less spending, but we did succeed in identifying sufficient funds to address the top priorities of the Senate caucus. And so if you want to just give us a brief overview, and then we'll dive into each of the 13 trailer bills.
Yes, Keely Bosler with the Department of Finance. Good morning, or good afternoon. So yes, this budget bill before you, AB 123, combined with the conference report that was passed by both houses on Monday, reflect the agreed upon 2015-16 budget. Also, all of the other trailer bills are bills that are necessary to implement the budget and are all part of that negotiated agreement that we're hearing today. Just here in AB 123, a few of the highlights and changes from the conference report included the provision of 7,000 additional full-day preschool slots, along with 6,800 additional voucher slots, voucher childcare slots. Also, additional money for CalWORKs housing, as well as foster care, foster family recruitment and retention as well. There are many, many changes, but those are a few of the major highlights that are in this bill, including also $11 million for dependency counsel at our courts.
And then, not to dig into it at this point, and I know there will be discussion on the floor tomorrow, but I don't think we can really look at the compromise budget completely without recognizing the two special sessions that the governor has called for. One, to look at our transportation needs for highways, roads, and bridges, through a special session that will begin immediately, to look at what the problem is, approximately $59 billion in deferred maintenance, and how we should address the revenue that will pay for it. And then additionally, the governor, and you'll correct me if I'm misspeaking at all, thought it best to not go forward with any of the repeals of the reductions for Medi-Cal reimbursements and for reimbursement payments for our developmental disabilities community by piecemeal. That a special session has been called to look at all of that, and again, to identify a new and dedicated revenue source, because clearly we don't have the hundreds, if not close to $1 billion in our current revenue structure to be able to afford the costs of the things that we, in a bipartisan fashion, all voted for in terms of restoring those reimbursement rates. So to deal with those questions, along with the question of the managed care organization tax, I think is a very wise thing to do. We're going to jump on that in the month of July, and this will engage us. And I just, there was rightful consternation, I know not only outside the building yesterday, in particular from the DD community, but around the state. And I don't want anyone from that community to be disheartened, that we take this very seriously. This might be justice delayed, but it will not be justice denied. We're going to deal with this, we're going to find the money to do it, and we're going to do it.
That's correct. Yesterday, or Tuesday, there were two special sessions that were called by the governor. The first being one on transportation and the roads, something that the governor has been talking about since the budget was introduced in January. There really is a significant shortfall in monies available to maintain the state system that we have. And deferred maintenance continues to grow and accrue every year. So our hope is in this special session that we can really focus the conversation about this important issue for the state of California and move a proposal for additional funds for our roads forward this year. Then finally, also the healthcare financing special session was also called. As you'll recall, our January proposal does include a managed care organization tax. This is a revised structure of this new tax based on guidance from the federal government that's requiring us to change our structure. That, along with many of the other issues that we've discussed through this budget process related to rates, we want to have a full and robust conversation in that special session to address really a stable funding plan for the state's healthcare programs for next year and years going forward.
So as I said earlier, I think that's a very wise thing to do, and so we'll be attending to that in the immediate future. So moving on to our first trailer bill, we'll start. We're going to take just a pause to establish our quorum. Please call the roll.
Leno,
Here.
Nielsen.
Here.
Allen.
Here.
Anderson. Bell. Block. Hancock. Mitchell. Monning.
Here.
Morlock.
Present.
Wynn. Pan. Pabley. Roth. Stone. Wolk. We have a quorum.
Okay, we do have our quorum. Were there other comments from the committee before we get started? Senator Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate your strong comments with regard to your commitment. But I guess the question really is directed to the administration, because I do have concerns that we're taking a critical funding area that the legislature has clearly expressed in both the Assembly and the Senate and the Conference Committee in terms of our support on after many years now, really meaningfully addressing reimbursement rates in both health and the developmental disability community. So help me with process. Since we've taken it out of the current budget framework, the governor's called for special session. You know, worst case scenario, what happens if agreement isn't reached? You know, through the context of a budget, it's on a different time frame. There are expectations the voters have placed upon us by a particular date. That doesn't apply to a special session. And I guess I'm particularly concerned with regard to the DD community in that in the budget, it still contains the desired expectation around closure of the developmental centers, which starts the train out the station. And many of the investments that we discussed in sub 3 in this House, as well as the Assembly, are talking about the reality of what happens to the people who live there and making sure that we don't revisit what we all remember in California history, where an administration closed certain hospitals with the promise and commitment that community resources would be created, made available, and that never really came to fruition. So to avoid that, repeating that historical mistake, you know, what happens if no agreement comes up with? You know, where does that leave us in that we will have missed the window of the current budget season and framework where we are talking about, you know, major investments in core infrastructure in health and developmental services?
So So it's hard for me to speculate about how exactly the special session will go, but I will say that the goal of the administration is to have a process where all ideas are really put on the table about how to finance the state's healthcare infrastructure, including rate increases for the regional center community, regional center community as well. So that conversation, I think, will unfold over this summer. I think the administration is very open to a broad conversation on how to achieve shared goals. I think in terms of the regional center system, this is a system that the administration spends a great deal of time and attention understanding, and there's been many adjustments over the last few years to rates for the system based on many changes that have occurred, including minimum wage, the provision of overtime to certain workers, as well as paid sick leave, which is a bill that we're just implementing this year. So there has been a conversation back and forth with the community, and there will continue to be one. They are absolutely integral to the administration's goals to close the developmental centers outside of the secure treatment area at Porterville, and so that conversation will absolutely continue and has been going on for some time and will continue, because the panoply of service providers in the community are critical to our ability to close the developmental centers.
On that point, we would agree. But again, let me just make sure I'm clear about process. If a funding stream isn't identified, because we are now outside of the budget process for 15-16, there will be no ability to commit general funds to these services. And so the only way we will be able to take action in those critical areas is if there is agreement on a funding stream.
All things will be placed on the table for the special session. But yes, a funding stream is critical to the ongoing sustainability of the state's overall budget. So yes, a funding stream needs to be identified.
Thank you for that clarification.
Senator Mitchell, all great questions and concerns. And my own perspective on the special session with regard to healthcare is that I am entirely optimistic, and that because of public interest, public scrutiny, and public pressure, this legislature will find the political will to do what it needs to do.
And I agree with you, and just want to clarify, this legislature found the political courage to do it. Right. Many of those investments already. And so I just wanted to understand the process, sir, because we are outside of the budget process, right, that this is a different stream. And, I'm concerned about a special session that doesn't necessarily have the intake.
As I said,
I agree with you, and
yeah.
You give me a dose of your optimism, and
okay.
I'm going to drink it.
And just to be clear for all those who are listening, that because we collectively did decide to go with the lower revenue expectation, that under that recognition, there isn't the money, and now we have to find it. And that's what the special session's about. Senator Pan.
Thank you, and I do appreciate the governor calling a special session to look at sort of long-term stability in healthcare and the DD and so forth. And I think we do need to talk about, revenues and what kind of revenues can be dedicated to that. But I also and it sort of piggybacks a bit on Senator Mitchell's point, is that I hope that we are not constrained in our discussions about what we can do in the future, because we really, first of all, need to look at the needs. And then, and that we're not going to say, well, because we only, found we could only get, we negotiated a new deal on a revised MCO, whatever, and that brings in, who knows, let's say 500 million instead of, or less money than we got in past years. And we say, well, that's all the money that we have, and that and therefore we say that that the general fund is completely off the table for DD and health both in the short term and in the long term, that we're saying that in the special session, only the revenues we can raise are available for these programs to try to address needs. So I just hope that, we definitely, it's good to be able to have this discussion. I think we need to look at other revenue sources. We need to look at how do we stabilize, but also is that we have to look at the total need and what the size of that is, and that we don't just say that those can only be met only by whatever we can find in additional new revenues. I mean, we have to, again, prioritize how we're doing our spending. I mean, for example, we took the federal government through their S-chip renewal. Actually, we actually cut $300 million for children in Medicaid. Now, we also did put some back to do some good things that I support, but at the same time, that money was taken away. And, we may have redirect other priorities, but the thing is that, I think that I don't want to come into special session saying, well, the governor's saying, well, only the amount of money you can find in additional revenues is going to be available to address the issues that he put into the special session, which is the IHSS, the DD, and as well as Medi-Cal payment rates.
Thank you, Senator. We do have comments from Senator Pavley and then Senator Stone.
I just wanted to piggyback on what Senator Mitchell brought up, and I appreciate that. The disabled community was just sort of just shocked, I guess, and felt disrespected through the budget process. So I want to make sure that when we have this discussion, and I think Dr. Pan brought it up too, we have to go find revenues. Okay, find revenues. So one of the questions I had as more and more of the state hospitals have been closing, and this is my 13th year in the legislature, and we've actually had this conversation most every year. Not only is the money when people move out supposed to follow those clients and providing services in their community, how about the sale of the properties? What happens to those funds? Where are they going? That's where the money is. That's where the new money is. Agnes, Landman, where is that money going? And is it just in the general fund, which is off limits?
As part of the overall budget package, there is some new transparency language about the savings that will accrue when the developmental centers are closed, and the administration is committed to ensuring that that data is available to the public and to the legislature. In terms of the disposition of the properties, this is an ongoing conversation that will continue to have. There is nothing in this package specifically about any of those properties. There is a lot of work to do before we get to that point. And our focus in this budget is really on building the community services so that we can make the seamless transition for the current residents at the developmental centers into the community, and that the community resources are there. So that's really been this year's focus, but understand that the disposition of those properties is an ongoing issue, and one that there will continue to be a dialogue about.
And historically, if and when that happens, goes into the general fund?
There is existing state law about the surplus properties, about the disposition of surplus properties, and that is something that is in current law. And so if there were any changes to the normal process, those monies, yes, would be returned to the general fund.
That's my point.
Yes.
That's my point, exactly.
And Senator Pavley?
That's where the additional monies are, and we have not seen a disposition of a state hospital, even though 5 have closed.
This is a conversation we'll get into in one of the trailer bills,
Great.
where there is
Thank
some
you.
intent language that deals with this very issue. And so we will get to that. Senator Stone, and then we're going to try and move forward. But go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to say that I strongly concur with the comments with my colleague on Budget Sub 3 from Los Angeles, and certainly Senator.
I think in the committee you can mention names. It's just
I
the
can't,
floor.
thank you. I'm still learning the protocols here. My honorable colleague, Senator Mitchell, who I've had a great pleasure of working with, as well as Senator Pavley. And it's interesting that we have these closures of these potential facilities that in the past have not generated resources for the DD community. And I agree with my colleagues that any disposition of these properties, the proceeds should go to the developmentally disabled, disadvantaged communities. I'm also puzzled and frustrated that two of the biggest issues that we've probably faced this year is, with the exception of water, importance to the state infrastructure and fully funding the Medi-Cal and developmentally disabled population that have seen horrific cuts. We've seen horrific neglect of maintaining our state highways. Coming from the Board of Supervisors, these were all issues, social issues, infrastructure issues that we addressed in the budget. And by not fully addressing the Medi-Cal deficiencies, the DD community, the infrastructure problems of the state in the budget, we are leaving the most highly vulnerable populations of this state with tremendous anxiety, where we've basically shut off any possibility of fully funding them unless during these special sessions we talk about finding new revenues. Well, finding new revenues isn't going to come from closing the developmental centers anytime soon, because that's going to take years before we start seeing any of those type of resources. When we talk about revenues, we all know what we're talking about. We're talking about taxes. We're talking about raising taxes on hardworking Californians, which is something that we should debate. But I believe, Mr. Chairman, we should be discussing all of these parameters in the budget process to give surety to my colleagues. I want to make sure, including myself, that the most vulnerable of populations in the state of California are guaranteed to be taken care of. We've neglected them over the past 10 years, not because we wanted to, but because there hasn't been the financial resources. $1 billion over the past 10 years. And I know we're all very compassionate here. And I know that we have until June 30th to pass a budget that is acceptable to the governor, that is acceptable to the Assembly and the Senate. And I, for one, I'm willing to not go home. I'm willing to stay here until June the 30th, and let's put a package together, a budget package together that is global, that takes care of all of our needs, so that we can give assurances to the taxpayers, not in the dark of night, that we're passing things that they didn't know about, but let's prioritize issues for those that just don't have a voice. And I speak about people, Peter Lai. I went to this home, this group home in Desert Hot Springs, my friends, and I walked in, and all 6 of the patients in this group home were all paraplegics. They were on respirators with batteries. And I was greeted by all of these young people coming out of the doors in their wheelchairs and thanking me for being there and thanking me for allowing them to live in such a wonderful environment where they have such wonderful professionals that care for them with their most intimate needs. And he said, please, Mr. Stone, whatever you could do, please ensure that you restore the Medi-Cal funding so that these homes aren't going to be insolvent. And my brother and I, his brother has a rare form of muscular dystrophy like he did, so we're not thrown out on the street, or we're not sent home where we have elderly parents that can't take care of us. We need to stand up for these people that can't speak for themselves, that need our help. And it's my view we should be doing it in the budget, not because it's easy, because it's difficult. We're going to be discussing issues that are very contentious and very troubling for many people, but I, for one, came up here to want to make people's lives better. Middle-class Americans, lower-class, middle-class, low-income people, and we have this obligation to do it. And we shouldn't just say, well, we're going to siphon off and silo the biggest issues that are going to be the most contentious because they could interrupt the budget process. It is the budget process that we should be addressing these issues. And I know it throws a wrench into things, and many of you may not want to hear this, but I care deeply about these populations. And I think that we're selling them short with the uncertainty that we may not be able to take care of them in a way in which many of us want to take care of them. So I hope that the committee will reconsider potentially working with the governor, and let's have the discussions. Let's discuss the higher taxes. Let's discuss what we want to do and make it a part of the global budget. Let's walk out of here. Let's walk out of Sacramento knowing we did our job by June 30th and show the citizens of the state that we can work together and we can find common solutions to problems that are very important to people.
Thank you, Senator Stone. Colleagues, I'm going to implore you all to focus on the work ahead of us. The fact is, the governor has called for 2 special sessions. The governor has the constitutional authority to call for special sessions. That is a fact. We could re-debate the entire budget that we passed on Monday, which is not before us today, but I suggest that would be a waste of time. So we're going to call for public comment on AB 123, the bill that is before us. Then we have a motion by Senator Monning on it, and we will call the roll. Is there any public comment on AB 123? If not, please call the roll.
Leno?
Aye.
Leno, aye. Nielsen? No. Nielsen, no. Allen?
Aye.
Allen, aye. Anderson? Bell? Aye. Bell, aye. Block? Block, aye. Hancock? Aye. Hancock, aye. Mitchell? Aye. Mitchell, aye. Monning? Aye. Monning, aye. Morlock? No. Morlock, no. Wynn? No. Wynn, no. Pan? Aye. Pan, aye. Pavley? Pavley, aye. Roth? Aye. Roth, aye. Stone? No. Stone, no. Wolk? Aye. Wolk, aye.
The vote is 11-2. Is that correct, 11-2? There should, yeah, 11-4. Thank you very much. 11-4. The bill is out.